Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Whether you're joining us online or in person, it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. You are welcome here. My name is Sara Drew, and I'm grateful to be joining you this morning as your guest speaker. Every Sunday, this community comes together, bringing our individual experiences to each other to share in community. And I'm especially aware that this past week may have you carrying even more joy, exhaustion, sadness, excitement, or a whole host of other things this morning. My hope is that as we come together this morning, we can make space for and be nourished by each other. I've chosen a quote from Assata Shakur for our chalice lighting words. We need to be weapons of mass construction. Weapons of mass love. It's not enough to change the system. We need to change ourselves. Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. I'll welcome Jeffrey to lead us to greet our neighbors.
Good morning. And now, in the spirit of community and our beloved congregation, let's all move around and say greet each other into this new day. And those online, please unmute to say hello, use the chat. And good morning, everybody. Let's say hello.
A few years ago, I showed up here and was welcomed first as a ministerial intern, and then as a member, and then as an office administrator. Being here at Emerson was my very first experience with Unitarian Universalism, and with the foundation I got then, I've been able to start my career as a hospital chaplain, and I'm on a path toward UU ordination. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful that when I was a baby bird, Emerson was my nest, and it is always so nice to be back. In a lot of ways, it feels silly to be talking about generosity today with a community that I already know to be so generous. But I hope we can all get a gem of realization from our service this morning. Many years ago, even before I showed up on Emerson's doorstep, a friend had posted a poem on her Facebook page and had kindly tagged me and a whole bunch of others, noting that she knew several people who did the sort of things that this poem points out, and she was grateful for them. It was long ago enough that I had forgotten most of the words, all except that it thanked people for pulling in their feet so others could get by. While beginning to prepare for speaking for you today, I made it my personal mission to find this poem, and with some expert Googling, I found it. All over again, I remembered why I had been carrying a little piece of it with me for so long. It reminded me that one of the things I want each of us to know today is that our generosity matters. And without further ado, the poem is called Small Kindnesses by Danusha Lamaris. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers still say, "Bless you," when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone will help you pick them up. And mostly we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back. For the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat." Thank you for sharing that with me this morning. And we're going to move to share opening hymn number 175. You can rise as you are willing or able, in body or in spirit. It's called "We Celebrate the Web of Life."
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones sink stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Good morning. My name is Michael Myers, and I am going to be your joys and sorrows today. Could somebody get the book? Sorry, but I forgot to get the book this morning. Now we pause and reflect on matters of the heart, and Douglas will be our grateful stirrer of And thank you, Douglas, for that. For this morning's ritual, we have water and we have river stones. The stones are smooth and the stones have weight. They are indicative of both life's pleasures and times of ease, as well as life's burdens and times of heaviness. The water receives these stones with ease and calmness. Each week we invite you to write a joy, sorrow, or concern in this book, or email it to pastoralcare@emersonuu.org to be read. If you're online, we invite you to recreate this ritual at home. You place a stone in a bowl of water to honor what is in your heart. We begin by placing 3 stones. The first stone, in honor of the Cherokee and Muskogee nations, indigenous people who lived here before us. The second stone, for those wrongly enslaved who labored on this land. The third stone, for all those hurting in current conflicts across our globe. And I see that we actually have nothing in the book this morning. It is a light week. We add a final stone for those concerns that may be held silently in our hearts. In thankful awareness, let's read the Buddhist prayer of loving kindness as is in your order of service. May we all be filled with loving kindness. May we all be free from harm and suffering. May we all be well in body, heart, and mind. May we all be at peace. Blessed be.
One way we put our prayer of loving kindness into action is by partnering with other organizations who work to bring love, kindness, and justice to the world. We encourage our members and friends to support their work financially as we share our weekly collection and also by participating in direct action. This month's partner is GIPL, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, connecting faith, community, and planet. They work to engage communities of faith across Georgia in stewardship of creation as an expression of faithfulness and as a religious response to global climate change, resource depletion, environmental injustice, and pollution. Please give generously as you are able. For those in the sanctuary, as the basket is passed, please feel free to offer a donation or see in your order of service other ways to give. For those online, go to emersonuu.org and select the Giving tab to donate. All donations, unless otherwise specified, are equally shared between Emerson and our partner organization. We thank you for any support you can offer. Here today, they'd like to hear a story. We're going to be sitting on this beautiful quilt today to hear a story all about a quilt maker. It's a really comfortable quilt, so it's a good day to come up and listen to a story. Okay, there it is. Can you hear me now? Excellent. Good, good, good. All right. Welcome, everybody, to The Quilt. Today's story is called The Quilt Maker's Gift by Jeff Brumbo. There once was a quilt maker who lived high in the blue, misty mountains. Oh, there she is. Here and there and everywhere, the sun warmed the earth, It was said that she made the most beautiful, colorful, and unique quilts that anyone had ever seen. Some said there was magic in her fingers, while others claimed that her cloth and needles were bewitched. And still others that claimed that the quilts had actually fallen off of the shoulders of passing angels. Sometimes people would climb into the misty mountains to her house, their pockets full of gold, in the hopes that she would sell one of her quilts to them. But no matter how much they were willing to pay, she would always tell them,
I give my quilts only to the poor and homeless. My quilts are not for the rich.
On the darkest, coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town and wander the cobblestone streets until she found someone sleeping outside. Then she would take one of her beautiful quilts out and wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in tight, and then tiptoe away. She would then go back home and the next morning fix a nice hot cup of blackberry tea and begin to make a brand new quilt. At that time, there also lived a very greedy king. He was obsessed, here he is right here, greedy king. He was obsessed with getting gifts, and no matter how many hundreds of presents he received at Christmas and his birthday, it still wasn't enough. So he sent out his soldiers to find anyone who had not given him a present. By now, every room in the king's castle was filled with all sorts of amazing gifts, but even though he had so many beautiful, colorful, mysterious, and amusing gifts, the king never smiled.
Somewhere out there, there must be something that I don't have yet that will finally make me happy.
One day, a soldier rushed into the king's court and said, Your Majesty, we've heard of a quilt maker. It is said that her quilts are the most splendid and beautiful in the whole world.
What? And why has this quilt maker never given me one of her quilts as a gift?
Well, she only gives them to the poor and the needy, and she will not sell them for any amount of gold.
Well, we'll see about that. Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers.
So they set off in search of her. But when they arrived at her house and the king demanded a quilt, the old quilt maker just laughed.
Ah ha ha ha. My quilts are for the poor and needy, and you are clearly neither of these. But I will make a quilt for you. If you give gifts of everything you own to others, with each gift you give, I will sew another piece of your quilt. Once you have given away everything you own, your quilt will be done, and you may have it.
Give my stuff away? But I love all my wonderful things.
And he ordered his soldiers to take the beautiful quilt she had in her lap. But before they could take it, she tossed it out the window, where a sudden gust of wind took hold of it, and it vanished over the mountain. Thank you, wind. That was gone. So the king arrested the quilt maker and marched her to a cave where a bear slept. He chained her to the wall and said,
Now, when the bear wakes up, he will make a breakfast of you.
Whoa, harsh. Later, when the bear woke up, he stood up and growled at the old quilt maker. But she just smiled and said,
Oh, you poor bear. No wonder you're so grouchy. You sleep in this cave with no pillow. Go get a bundle of pine needles, and with my shawl, I'll make you a nice pillow.
No one had ever been kind to the bear before, and he was so happy to have a pillow. He broke her chain and invited her to stay as long as she liked. Now, the king was very good at being greedy, but he wasn't very good at being mean. He woke up in the middle of the night, and he woke up all the soldiers to go and save the lady from the bear. But when they arrived at the cave, they found them enjoying a lovely breakfast of berries and honey outside the cave. The king was furious.
Take her to a tiny island, so small she can only stand on her tiptoes. Since you won't make me a quilt, you can stay there. And once you tire of standing and you go to lie down, you will drown.
Whoa, that's even harsher than the bear, I think. The quilt maker, standing alone on her tiny island, saw a sparrow flying over the rough sea around the tiny island. He looked very tired and cold. She called to the sparrow, and he landed on her shoulder. She quickly made a coat for the bird out of scraps from her purple vest, so when he was warmed, he was able to fly away. The sparrow was so grateful to the quilt maker for saving him. Soon the air darkened around the little island as thousands of sparrows came and lifted the quilt maker up and brought her to the shore. Again, the king felt terrible for what he'd done, so he and the soldiers marched down to the beach to save the lady from the island. But when they got there, they saw her sitting in a tree, knitting little purple coats for all of the sparrows who had carried her to safety. That quilt
I
maker.
give up. What must I do to get you to make me a quilt?
Give away all that you have. With each gift you make, I will sew another piece of your quilt. When you have given everything away, your quilt will be done.
I can't give away my stuff, my beautiful things. How could I do that?
But if they don't make you happy, what good are they?
Oh, very well. If I must give away my treasures, then I must.
The first gift was a tough one for the king. He searched high and low through his treasures looking for something he could part with, and finally came out with one single marble. That was it. That was as good as he'd get. But when he gave it to a small boy, the smile that spread on the boy's face warmed the king's heart, although he still hadn't smiled himself. But he rushed back inside and came out with an armload of jewel-toned velvet coats and gave them to people he saw that only wore rags and old clothing. The people were so happy they marched in this grand parade around the town in their beautiful new coats. The king could see they were really happy, but still he didn't smile. He brought out blue cats and bright goldfish and gave them away. More smiles. Then he ordered his soldiers to bring out his merry-go-round with real live horses on it and to let the children ride them. They were so happy they started to cartwheel around the king, and finally the smallest of smiles began to show on the king's face. By now the whole town was dancing and laughing, and the king could see how much happiness he had brought them, and suddenly a small girl took his hand and pulled him into the dance. Now he really did smile and even laughed out loud.
How can this be? How can giving some of my treasures away make me feel so happy? Bring out all of my treasures.
Meanwhile, the quilt maker kept her word, and with each gift he made, she added another piece to the quilt. The king went on and on for years, trading his gifts for smiles. One day, a very, very weary sparrow flew into the quilt maker and perched on her needle. She knew the king had finally given away his last present, and she put the last piece in his quilt and made her way down the mountain. She found the king reading a story to some kids and saw his clothes were in tatters, his toes poked through his boots, but his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was loud and thunderous. She unfurled the beautiful quilt she'd made, and it was really, really beautiful. It was her best one ever. Every color of the rainbow with so many designs and pictures that butterflies and hummingbirds were suddenly fluttering all around it. She gently wrapped it around the king.
What is this?
As I promised you long ago, once you were poor, I would give you a quilt.
But I'm not poor. My clothes may look that way, but my heart is full with happiness I've received from giving so many gifts. I'm the richest man I know.
Nevertheless, I made this quilt just for you.
Very well. I will take it, but only if you take this gift from me.
The king had saved one last gift just for the quilt maker, and he brought it out now. It was his very own throne.
Please, take my throne. It's a surprisingly comfortable and just the place to sit and do your sewing.
After that, the king visited the quilt maker's house often. She spent her days in the royal seat making more quilts, and at night the king would come and bring them to the town and search for anyone who was cold or homeless to make a gift of the special quilt. He was never happier than when he was giving gifts to others. All right. Well, thank you very much for the wind and king and the quilt maker, everybody who helped me tell a story today. Let's go ahead and stand and sing our song of dedication. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its word. Blessed
You'll notice in our order of service that the anthem was initially supposed to be sung by Lindsay and Anna, and they are under the weather today. And so we will send them a little bit of love and healing energy, and luckily we have Bruce always here, and he is going to play us a passacaglia, a little Italian lesson this morning. You can see it didn't totally hit perfectly. Passacaglia by Handel Haverson. Thank you, Bruce. Talk about generosity. When I think about generosity, I think about a phrase that you might have heard of: time, talent, and treasure. Essentially, a willingness to share our resources. For me, maybe because I've really never had that many resources, sharing them has never been the bigger problem, but the management of the expectations around sharing them has occasionally been a different story. I used to be an avid listener of a podcast with Gretchen Rubin. It's called Happier. She's a writer who gained much attention with her book, The Happiness Project, in which she did research on happiness and then followed the advice of that research, adding one new process every week for a year. If she learned, say, that 10 minutes of meditation each day made people happier, she did it, and then she wrote about the outcomes. The podcast is more of the same sort of experimentation, and she also responds to listeners' questions or ideas. One time a listener was preparing for hosting Thanksgiving dinner for her family. Y'all might relate to that today. I hope you don't relate to this next part. She recounted the previous years in which she had worked for weeks, cleaning her house, decorating the table, prepping and cooking the food, just meticulous attention to every detail. She spent all of Thanksgiving Day working from dawn until dusk, and if I recall correctly, she had done this for years. But in the last year or two, something had shifted for her, and so she wrote into Gretchen, asking for advice. She had an inkling the year before that her family didn't really appreciate her work, and so she paid special attention last Thanksgiving. It turned out she was right. Not one person thanked her, complimented her, or offered to help. She was asking Gretchen and Gretchen's sister Elizabeth, the podcast co-host, what she should do this year. I was listening, driving along in my car, and internally, or maybe even externally, screaming, "Don't do it." I had imagined the only way the listener could manage her own ego, expectations, teach her rude family a lesson, was to ditch her previous Thanksgiving workload entirely, sort of like my quilt blew away in the wind there. The only way for everyone to regroup was to abort mission and fast. Gretchen and Elizabeth were a lot more generous, you can imagine, with their response, coaching her to get clear about what she wanted to give and receive and communicate her boundaries, which was good advice for all of us, if maybe a little dissatisfying to me at the time. Sure, we need to be clear about our expectations and clear about our motivations. We can all do well to check in with our egos and interrogate our sense of entitlement. I still think there's a more important conversation, though. Isn't there more that we can ask of ourselves? Isn't there a more generous way? I think that beyond the concept of generosity of resources is a generosity of spirit, or in practical terms, thinking of others. That's what makes you pull your feet in when someone is trying to pass you in a narrow space. That's also what makes you grateful when people do pull their feet in when you're trying to pass in that narrow space. The trouble we get in, and when I say we, I mean I, the trouble I have gotten in when I aim to have an endless spirit of generosity is that I can become overwhelmed. There are just so many people who need and deserve so much. My most humble self can feel inadequate pretty quickly. My very first professional job was as a social worker. I was 21. It was a while ago. I had just graduated from college, and I had been hearing that social workers will have to figure out how to protect themselves from burnout because the system was not set up with social workers' wellness or longevity in mind. I had taken all of that with a grain of salt, primarily because I had not come from an easy place, and I was dedicated to walking with others who were also not in an easy place. At first, I thought there might be something helpful in finding the right agency or the right kind of clients. Maybe those with mental health needs were a better fit for me, or maybe those struggling with HIV diagnosis, or maybe young children who require extra services. So I kind of bounced around from here to there, trying to figure it out for a few years. One day, it clicked. I saw the forest and the trees. I would have to choose. I could either be open and engaged in that generosity of spirit that led me to social work in the first place. I would be devastated every day with the sincere knowledge that I could work as hard as possible and maybe not be able to substantially change a thing for any of my clients. Or I could not change a thing, which would leave me feeling just like the walking wounded. Or I could shut it off, becoming a robot, handling business. No spirit, no generosity, but intact, kind of. Instead of making that decision, I moved on from social work. through being a librarian and a yoga teacher and life in general for nearly 25 years since that moment of realization. And to some extent, I've kept that story with me because it really never ceased to be true. Whenever I wanted to be what I am calling generous of spirit, I also had to be careful not to open too wide to the vastness of need. Sure, I can stop and help one person who has dropped their lemons from their grocery bag, but can I help everyone? Over the years, I've come up with rules for myself to protect my capacity. I don't watch the news, try to be cognizant of how much I am expending so that I pay equal attention to rest and recuperation. It has always felt unfortunate to me. I wanted a never-ending well of generosity, but hit dry ground on a regular basis. I am happy to be here to tell you that I think I cracked my own generosity code. And if you have related to any of the generosity predicaments I've explained so far, I think I might be able to help you too. As part of my chaplain work last year at Winship Cancer Institute and this year at Emory University Hospital Midtown, I've gotten to learn cognitively based compassion training, or CBCT, and compassion-centered spiritual health, or CCSH. Don't need to know that, but just if you're interested. They assert in the smallest of a nutshell that if we are grounded in compassion for ourselves, we are more capable of compassion for others. I had a light bulb moment in training one day when there was a slide that explained that there are two paths we are usually able to take. And when we encounter someone else's suffering, either we become enmeshed in the problem, taking on the suffering for ourselves, which leads to empathetic distress, emotional dysregulation, or burnout, exactly what I was afraid of when I was that young social worker, working with those people who had real problems that I knew I couldn't really affect. Or we can turn away, causing depersonalization, despair, helplessness, or burnout. That was my other option I saw all those years ago. It just clicked for me. This has been my path. Luckily, the slide had a middle way. My age-old emotional wreck or robot fork in the road had another prong. This time, the middle path wasn't waffling between the two to manage the awfulness of one track or the other, but it offered a whole new option: compassion. Compassion leads to warm-heartedness, presence, attunement, motivation, and action. It is sustaining rather than depleting. I would be lying if I told you I wasn't skeptical when I saw that slide. But without much to lose, I've been trying it for about 8 months, and I think it works. There's also some research that supports it working, so that's really helpful too. Here's the trick. The foundation of both courses are cultivating compassion for oneself first. We need to be grounded in compassion for ourselves. And then we can connect to others suffering authentically and with that generosity of spirit and continue to regulate ourselves at the same time. With practice, the well can replenish itself. My own understanding of God, or spirit, is that it is present in every living thing, that we can turn away from that part of ourselves or we can engage it, and that the most direct path to God or spirit is connecting with others. This connection is the real point of generosity. It is the real point of the compassion. And also, it is incidentally why my initial reaction to that earlier Thanksgiving story was, shall we say, misguided. In the same way I might have been overwhelmed by the suffering and the needs of others, my closest relationships, acquaintances, those people and animals that I don't know personally, whether they be near or far, and the environment itself, there is no end to living beings needing compassion, which is why the prospect of doing something can be so overwhelming. But now, I can cultivate compassion for myself in light of each of these realms and begin to connect more fruitfully. These systems that I'm describing are multifaceted, and I'm just a beginner. But if you'll indulge me, I'd like to offer you the very first kernel of the practice, which focuses on what are called nurturing moments. So if you'll take a moment, if you're not already really comfortably seated, you'll root your feet, planting them, and your hips in your seat, maybe feeling your back all along your chair, but not slouching into your chair, lifting instead the crown of your head, letting your shoulders fall away from your ears. You can close your eyes if you're comfortable doing it. You can also find a downward gaze if that's more comfortable. First, before we start, just notice what's going on for you this morning. Where do you feel physical tension? Maybe starting at the top of your head and just doing a quick sweep over your body, noticing if you're clenching your teeth, if you are making fists with your hands, if you're curling your toes. And if you notice any of that tension, see if you can release it. And then turn your attention to your breath. Again, first just noticing the qualities that are there. Is it deep or shallow? Is it fast or slow? And then moving to remove the tension there as much as you can, finding a slow and steady breath in and out through your nose. One of the most accessible ways to connect to compassion within ourselves is to access moments in which we felt cared for, fulfilled, or supported. From that place, our emotions are even and our nervous system is regulated. We are capable of being our most compassionate. I want you to think of a time, someone close to you, where you felt nurtured and cared for. It could be a pet. It could be a time when someone told you you did a good job. It could be in the past. It could be in the present. It could be your grandmother pulling a pie out of the oven. Whatever brings that sense of comfort and joy and nurturing to you. I'll let you sit with that for a moment. Letting that joy of that maybe long gone moment wash over you. And then if you could sort of metaphorically put that moment in your pocket for later. Move to find a nurturing moment with someone at Emerson or another community you're a part of. Sometime when someone did something for you, said something to you that lifted you up, put a little air in your sails, made you feel like you were connected and could go farther. Noticing the warmth that came from that moment. And noticing how you can access it again just by calling it up. Again, folding that moment up, putting it in your pocket for later. Think of a nurturing moment with a stranger. Maybe they pulled their feet in when you needed to get through an aisle. Maybe they helped you pick up your lemons that you dropped. This one is especially important, I think, in being able to notice that nurturing moments are happening all the time. We can greet people with smiles, and we are greeted with smiles. We are warmly welcomed. We can warmly welcome. Noticing perhaps this time how little we have to really expend to get a big emotion, a big payoff. And then one last time, folding that up, putting it in your pocket. Move to seek a nurturing moment that reminds you of a time that nature nurtured you. Maybe you have a special spot. Maybe you're a beach person and this moment is sitting by the ocean. Maybe it's a bird that you have befriended in your yard. Imagine that happening right here, right now. An animal, a plant, the sun shining on your face. Letting any heaviness you're carrying fall away. Recalling the sensation of fresh air coming in through your nose. Warm grass or sand beneath your feet. You might fold this one up and put it in your pocket too. You might keep it with you or pull out one of the other nurturing moments that you've already come up with. The idea is that you collect these moments. You have a little tackle box of all your choices, these moments that nourish you so that when you need them, you have access to them. And by being grounded there, you are nurtured, you are fulfilled, you have the capacity to then turn that nurturing outward. The idea is that if you are grounded there first, you will be able to be generous with no end. Your well will never run dry. And return your attention back to your body, noticing if you've picked up any of that strain or stress, and just giving one more intentional release there. Noticing your breath. Again, take just a few more breaths, slow and steady, in through your nose, back out through your nose. When you feel ready, you can blink open your eyes if they have been closed. And come back to the room. Thank you so much for sharing in generosity with me this morning. I appreciate your time and attention and hope that you are nourished. We're going to move to our closing hymn, which is number 1066, O Brother Sun. When you're ready, you can rise in body or spirit.
Oh, brother, son, you bring
Just a couple of quick announcements. Make sure you plan to be here December 10th for the Emerson Christmas pageant this year. It's going to be a little different. The Lemony Snicket play, which, when you think of Christmas, who doesn't think of Lemony Snicket? It's going to be great. It's called The Latka Who Couldn't Stop Screaming. I understand some really, really fantastic costumes, and I know the cast has been working really, really hard, so that should be a lot of fun. So please plan to be here December 10th for that. And there are regular RE activities for adults and youth. Just look into the order of service after for a list of all of them. And now for our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. Go in peace, and may peace take peace wherever you go. That's it. Thanks. Oh, my pleasure. It was
Should
fun.
have said that. Yes.
I loved doing that. That was a really fun story.
I love it too.
Yeah, it was really good.
You did a great job of making it short because that book is long.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it seemed like it didn't go on too long.
No, I think it was great. It was like
Yeah.
engaging.
But I was glad I
Turn this to Reverend Christina.
Okay, I can take it. I've got some mail that I have to put on her desk.
Oh, perfect.